David Cole was 38 years old, and until that Friday afternoon, he believed the two people he trusted most in the world were exactly who they claimed to be. He co-owned the electrical contracting company his father had built from nothing. 32 employees, a government contract on the horizon, a legacy worth protecting. His wife, Angela, handled the books. His brother, Troy, handled the accounts. David handled everything else, the way he always had. Quietly, without complaint, without suspicion. When the hotel receipt fell out of Angela's jacket pocket, David didn't confront her. He didn't call her name. He did what he always did. He measured twice before he cut. He installed 4 cameras. He went back to work. And on a Friday afternoon, crouched over a job site with his laptop open on the truck tailgate, he watched the front door of his own house open. Angela walked in first. Troy followed. What David saw next wasn't just a betrayal. It was the beginning of everything unraveling, and none of them knew he was watching. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The kitchen light came on at 5:43 a.m. David Cole didn't need an alarm. Never had. He was already dressed. Dark work pants, a gray Cole family electrical polo, boots laced tight. Before the coffee finished brewing, he moved through the kitchen the way he moved through everything. Quietly, deliberately, without waste. He set his mug on the table. He opened the thick manila folder he'd carried down from the office upstairs. Invoices, material costs, labor projections for the Henderson Avenue project. Standard Tuesday morning work. He spread the papers flat and reached for a pen. But before he got to the invoices, he paused. Beneath the folder was one of the old ledgers, his father's. The cover was cracked brown leather, the spine held together with a strip of electrical tape that had gone stiff and yellow at the edges. His father had taped it himself, years ago, too stubborn to let a working book retire before it was finished. David opened it to a middle page. The numbers were in his father's hand, small, slanted, pressed hard into the paper like the man had been trying to make them permanent. In the margins beside a materials column, his father had written, "Markup too low. Fix before next bid." Beside a labor entry, "Jerome's cousin. Good worker, call him back." Small notes. Practical notes. The handwriting of a man who was always thinking 3 steps ahead, even on paper. David ran his thumb along the margin. Charles Cole had started the company with a pickup truck, a used conduit bender, and a license he studied for by flashlight because he worked days. 32 employees now. A government contract sitting on the table waiting to be signed. The man had been dead 4 years, and his fingerprints were still on everything. David finished his coffee. He got to work. The office on Mercer Street was a converted warehouse. Wide, clean, smelling faintly of wire insulation and fresh coffee from the break room. David arrived at 7 and was deep into the Henderson bid by the time Troy came through the door at 8:30. "Morning." Troy dropped into the chair across from David and reached for the bid sheet without looking at it. Troy Cole was 3 years older, broader across the shoulders, and loud in the way men are loud when they've decided the room belongs to them. He had their father's laugh and used it generously. He charmed clients, remembered birthdays, and kept the energy in every meeting high enough that nobody noticed when he hadn't done the prep work. David noticed. He always noticed, but he said nothing about it, because the work still got done. "Henderson project," David said, sliding the folder across. "We're $4,200 over budget on materials if we use the original supplier. I found an alternative. Same spec, better price, local. I need you to look at the numbers and tell me if you see anything I missed." Troy picked up the folder, glanced at the first page. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. And then something crossed his face. Fast, almost invisible. A private amusement that had nothing to do with anyone else in the room. His mouth curved. He typed something quick with his thumb, and set the phone face down on the table. "Sorry," he tapped the folder. "Yeah, this looks good. I trust your numbers, man." David looked at him for a moment. "I need you to actually read it, Troy." "I said it looks good." "I heard you." Troy grinned and leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide. "Relax. You always been like this. You know that? Even as a kid. Everything gotta be a whole process." He shook his head, still smiling. "It looks good, David. Move forward." David pulled the folder back and wrote a note in the margin. He said nothing else about it. Troy's phone buzzed again. This time, Troy stood up to answer it, stepping out into the hallway with his back turned, his voice low and easy and warm in a way it hadn't been in the meeting. David watched the empty doorway. Then he looked back down at his father's careful numbers. He moved forward. Angela got home at 9:15. She came through the front door, carrying herself in a way that didn't match a Thursday dinner with girlfriends. Her earrings were the gold ones she saved for occasions. Her heels added 3 inches. Her perfume was the expensive kind, the bottle at the back of the bathroom shelf that she usually saved for when it mattered. "Hey, baby." She kissed him on the cheek without stopping, already moving toward the stairs. "Have a good time?" David asked. We went to that new place on 5th. You'd hate it." A light laugh floated back down the hallway. Too trendy. He listened to her heels on the stairs. Then he stood, picked up her jacket from where she'd draped it over the banister, and carried it to the coat closet. He hung it up, and when he smoothed the front panel flat, his fingers found something stiff in the left pocket. He reached in. A receipt, folded in thirds. He opened it slowly, standing there in the thin light of the hallway closet. Grand Meridian Hotel, downtown. The date was a Tuesday, 3 weeks back. A room charge. Checkout at 4:17 p.m. David looked at it for a long time. He did not move. Then he folded it back along the same creases, neat, exact, and slid it into his own wallet. He finished hanging up the jacket. He closed the closet door. He went back to the kitchen table and sat down in front of his invoices. 40 minutes later, Angela's light went out upstairs. David capped his pen. He collected his papers. He turned off the kitchen light and walked out the side door to his truck, sitting in the dark driveway with the engine off and the receipt in his hand. 11 minutes passed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicking. He was somewhere quieter than both of those things, a place he recognized. The same place he went when a job site problem turned out to be bigger than what showed on the surface. The place where he stopped reacting and started thinking. He folded the receipt, put it back in his wallet. Then he went inside. He did not say a word. David drove to Harmon Supply at 6:45 the next morning, before the counter staff had finished their first cup of coffee. He didn't need to browse. He walked straight to the job site monitoring section, the way a man walks when he already knows what he came for. 4 compact wireless cameras, the kind his crews used on commercial builds to watch equipment overnight. Small enough to tuck behind a book or above a doorframe. Motion activated, with a feed that pushed directly to a laptop or phone. He'd installed dozens of them on job sites. He knew exactly how far they could see and exactly how little space they needed to hide. He paid cash. He carried the bag to his truck and drove home without stopping. Angela left for her mother's on Saturday morning, rolling a small suitcase to her car while David stood in the doorway with a coffee mug. "I'll be back Sunday evening," she said. She looked rested, lighter even than she'd been in weeks. "Drive safe," David said. She smiled at him, a quick, easy smile, and got in the car. He watched her pull out of the driveway. He finished his coffee. Then he went inside and got to work. He started downstairs. The living room camera went behind a row of books on the 3rd shelf of the built-in unit along the east wall. He angled it toward the center of the room, tested the frame on his laptop, adjusted it a 1/4 inch. The lens was smaller than a shirt button. You would have to know exactly where to look to find it. The home office camera took the most thought. It was Angela's workspace, The desk where she managed the company's accounts, paid vendors, filed the monthly reports David signed off on without always reviewing line by line. He trusted her with those books, the way he trusted her with everything else. He placed the camera on the shelf above the monitor, tucked between a binder and a small potted plant that hadn't been watered in weeks. He aimed it at the desk chair and the screen below it. The front door camera went in the coat closet, the same closet where he'd found the receipt, mounted just above the door frame, angled down at the entry. If anyone came through that door, the camera would have their face. Upstairs, the last camera went in the hallway, at the far end, set into the decorative trim above the linen closet. From that position, the lens had a clean sightline straight to the master bedroom door. Not into the room, just the door and whatever happened in front of it. He tested each feed, one at a time, walking through the house while the laptop sat open on the kitchen table. Every angle was clean. Every connection was solid. When he was done, he closed the laptop and walked through every room one more time, checking that nothing had been moved, nothing disturbed. He left everything exactly as he found it. The following week moved the way a careful man makes it move. David was polite to Angela at breakfast and in the evenings. He asked about her day. He listened to the answer. He did not study her face too hard or let the silence between them grow sharp. Nothing in his behavior had changed, and that was the point. If anything changed, she would feel it. At the office, he was professional with Troy, focused on the Henderson project, the upcoming contract review, a permit issue on a job in the East Side. Troy was his usual self, present enough, charming enough, glancing at his phone whenever he thought David wasn't looking. David reviewed every document Troy was supposed to review and said nothing about the ones Troy had clearly only skimmed. Sunday came. Troy arrived at 6 with a bottle of something and a loud story about a contractor he'd run into at the hardware store. He filled the kitchen with noise the way he always did, moving around the space like it was familiar to him in a way that was completely natural and completely normal, and gave David nothing concrete to point to. At dinner, Angela passed Troy the rolls without being asked. Small thing, could mean nothing. David noted it and kept eating. Later, clearing plates, Angela laughed at something Troy said. A half-second behind the punchline, like she'd heard the joke before, and was deciding how much amusement to show. Troy didn't look at her when she laughed. He looked at David, still smiling. David smiled back. He finished the dishes. He walked Troy to the door. He clapped his brother on the shoulder the way he always did, and Troy clapped him back, and they said goodnight the way they had 100 times before. David went to bed. He slept. Late Friday afternoon, he was crouched beside an open sub-panel on the Henderson Avenue site, checking a ground connection, when the laptop on his tailgate made a sound. A single soft ping. Motion alert. Front door camera. David set down his drill. He stood. He walked to the tailgate and opened the screen. The feed took 4 seconds to load. David watched the progress bar cross the screen. He stood at his tailgate with one hand resting on the lid of the laptop, and the afternoon sun cutting across the metal behind him. The front door camera came up first. Angela stepped inside. She had on a yellow blouse he recognized. She'd worn it to his cousin's birthday dinner back in the spring. She was carrying her purse and a plastic bag from the grocery store on 5th, and she moved through the front door the way a person moves when they believe no one is watching. Troy came in 2 steps behind her. He pulled the door shut. Not hard. Just closed it. The way you close a door in a house you know well. He reached past Angela to drop his keys on the entry table, David's entry table, the one his father had built by hand from reclaimed oak, and said something that made Angela turn and smile. David looked at the way she turned. He knew that smile. He'd watched her smile for 9 years. That was not a smile for a brother-in-law. He straightened up slowly. He did not look away from the screen. The front door feed was still running when the hallway camera triggered. He switched to it. The upstairs hallway was narrow, and the light was the flat, pale yellow of a Friday afternoon in early fall. They came into frame together. Angela first, Troy just behind her, close enough that there was no reading it as coincidence, no reading it as anything other than exactly what it was. They stopped at the bedroom door. Angela pushed it open. They went inside. The door closed. David looked at the timestamp at the bottom of the feed. He marked it. Then he waited. He stood at his tailgate in the sun, one hand still resting on the lid of the laptop. And he waited. The sub-panel behind him sat open. The ground wire he'd been checking dangled loose. The job site was quiet, except for the sound of a compressor running somewhere on the second floor, and the distant radio one of his guys had going near the back stairwell. David waited until the timestamp had moved far enough forward that there was no other interpretation. Not a conversation. Not anything innocent. Not anything he'd be able to doubt later, at 3 in the morning, when doubt is loudest. He needed to be certain. He was certain. He closed the laptop. He picked up his drill. He went back to the sub-panel and finished checking the ground connection. He moved to the next panel on the list. He worked through the last 40 minutes of the afternoon the same way he always worked. Methodical, thorough, signing off on each item before moving to the next. When the site was done, he locked the equipment cage, said goodnight to his foreman, and loaded the truck. He drove home at his normal time. Angela was in the kitchen when he came through the door. She had changed out of the yellow blouse. She was making pasta, something simple, and the radio was on low. She looked up when he walked in and smiled in the easy, automatic way she had. "How was the Henderson site?" she asked. "Finished the panel work," David said. He set his bag by the door and washed his hands at the sink. "Good. Hungry? I could eat." They sat across from each other, and she talked about a show she'd been watching, something about a family in Louisiana. And he listened and asked a question in the right place, and finished everything on his plate. She laughed once at something she'd seen in an episode. He smiled. He cleared the table. He washed both their plates. He waited until her breathing, upstairs, had settled into the slow and even rhythm of deep sleep. Then he came back down to the kitchen, sat at the table in the dark, and opened the laptop. He watched all of it, beginning to end. Every camera, every timestamp. He watched it the way a man reviews a document before signing his name to it, completely, without skipping, making sure he understood every word. When it was done, he pulled the encrypted external drive from the inside pocket of his work bag. He transferred the files. He verified the transfer. He put the drive back in the bag. Then he sat for a moment in the quiet kitchen, in the house his wife had brought his brother into, and he looked at the dark window above the sink. He closed the laptop. He went upstairs. He lay down on his side of the bed. Angela was asleep beside him, still and quiet. He looked at the ceiling. He picked up his phone from the nightstand and typed a message to Jerome Banks. "Need to meet tomorrow morning. Office. Come alone." He set the phone face down on the nightstand. He closed his eyes. David got to the office at 6:45. He unlocked the front door, disabled the alarm, and turned on the lights in the conference room. Not the main overhead fluorescence, just the lamp in the corner. He set his work bag on the table and pulled out the encrypted drive. He set his laptop open beside it. He did not sit down. He stood at the window and watched the parking lot. Jerome's silver Accord pulled in at 7:05. Jerome Banks was not a man who hurried, but he was never late. He came through the front door carrying a paper coffee cup and a leather folder he'd had since law school. Worn at the corners, the clasp replaced twice. He looked at David the way he always looked at him when something was wrong. Not with alarm, with attention. "Tell me," Jerome said. David locked the front door behind him. He didn't show Jerome the intimate footage. He never intended to. What he showed Jerome was the timestamp log, the front door camera, the hallway camera, entry time and exit time, with the date printed clearly at the top of each clip. Clean, clinical, undeniable. Jerome watched it once. He set his coffee down. He watched it a second time. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way he did when he was choosing which thought to lead with. "How long do you think it's been going on?" he asked. "I don't know," David said. "That's part of what I need to find out." Jerome nodded slowly. He opened the leather folder and uncapped a pen. "All right. What do you want to happen?" "I have a precise answer to that," David said, "but I'm not ready to use it yet." Jerome looked at him. He didn't push immediately. He wrote something at the top of the page instead. Then he laid out the option, the way a good attorney does, without editorializing, without letting his personal feelings about the situation color the presentation. Divorce filing. He could move on it this week. Angela was the company bookkeeper, which made the marital estate complicated, but not unmanageable. Jerome could have a petition drafted by Thursday. Asset protection. Separate David's personal accounts from the joint marital accounts before any filing was initiated. If Angela had any awareness that a move was coming, and given what she'd been doing, she was almost certainly watching, speed mattered. Legal separation as a middle step. Buys time without tipping the full hand. David listened to all of it, without interrupting. He let Jerome finish completely. Every option, every implication. Then he was quiet for a moment. "I'm not moving yet," he said. Jerome set his pen down. "David, I need the full picture first. Right now, I have one piece. If I move on one piece, the rest disappears." David's voice was level, unhurried. "They'll close everything down the moment they know I know. I lose the chance to find out how deep this actually goes. The longer you wait, the more complicated this gets," Jerome said. "That's not opinion. That is what happens legally when joint marital assets keep moving." "I know." David folded his hands on the table. "I need it complicated. Complicated means they keep going. And if they keep going, they'll show me everything themselves." Jerome looked at him for a long moment. He picked up his pen. He did not argue further, not because he had nothing left to say, but because he had known David Cole for over 15 years, and he recognized the particular quality of stillness that meant the decision was already made, and the only useful thing left to do was get to work. "I need you to start restructuring my personal financial exposure," David said, quietly. "Nothing that generates an alert. Nothing that looks like a move to anyone reviewing the accounts. Just preparation." Jerome wrote it down. "Time frame? Start this week. Go slow. I'll tell you when to stop." Jerome nodded. He wrote something else. He asked 2 clarifying questions about account structure, and David answered both of them without hesitation, because David knew every account, every routing number, every instrument his financial life was built on. He had always known. He had always paid attention. That was something people forgot about him, David thought. They saw the calm and assumed it was the whole picture. He arrived home at his normal time. Troy's truck was already in the driveway. A black F-250, parked at the easy, sideways angle of a man who didn't wonder whether he was welcome. The front windows of the house were warm and lit. David could hear laughter before he even opened his car door. Troy's laugh, big and unhurried, filling the kitchen the way it always filled every room Troy occupied. Angela's voice underneath it, bright, loose, the version of her laugh she saved for company. David sat in the car for a moment. He straightened his jacket. He checked his expression in the rearview mirror the way a man checks a level, not for vanity, but to make sure everything was true. He got out of the car. He came through the front door with his bag over his shoulder and a relaxed look on his face. "There he is," Troy said from the kitchen. "I was wondering when you'd drag yourself home." David smiled. "Somebody's got to do the actual work." Troy laughed. David set his bag down, walked into the kitchen, and clasped his brother's hand. She pulled up in a white Civic at 10:43 in the morning. David saw her from across the lot. Small frame, oversized cardigan, moving through the construction site entrance like someone who had never been to a job site before and was actively worried about it. She looked left, then right. Her hands were in her pockets. She found him and stopped moving. David set down the conduit bender and walked toward her. Patrice Whitfield was 31 years old and had always looked younger than that. Soft-featured, quieter than her sister in every way that mattered. He had always liked her well enough. She had always been kind to him in the careful way of someone who knew things they weren't supposed to know. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Hey, Patrice," he said. Easy. No alarm in his voice. "Hey, David." She swallowed. "I'm sorry to I called the office and they said you were out here and She stopped. Tried again. "Can we sit somewhere?" "Come on," he said. He walked her to his truck and opened the passenger door for her. He came around the other side and climbed in. He did not turn the engine on. He rested one hand on the wheel and waited. She looked straight ahead through the windshield for a moment, at the steel framing, the workers in vests moving between stations, the ordinary machinery of a workday. "I don't know exactly why I'm here," she said. "Yes, you do," David said. Not unkind, just true. She nodded. She pressed her lips together. "Angela's been planning to leave. For a while. A long time, actually." She glanced at him and then looked away. "More than a year." He didn't react. He kept his hand resting on the wheel, relaxed, and waited for her to continue. "She's been making arrangements." Patrice chose the word carefully, the way you pick something up when you're not sure if it's hot. "I don't know exactly what kind. She didn't tell me all of it. She told me enough." "Okay," David said. Patrice turned the strap of her purse over in her hands. She wrapped it once, unwrapped it. She thought she had time. That's what she kept saying. That she had time. That she was handling it. He thought about Angela refilling his glass at dinner 2 nights ago, smiling, asking about his week. He thought about the way she'd kissed him on the cheek that morning, like it was a habit she hadn't bothered to break yet. He let Patrice sit with her own words for a moment. Then he asked her the question, "Is there a child?" The air in the truck changed. Patrice went completely still. She didn't look at him. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just stopped. Her hands stopped moving on the purse strap. Her breathing went shallow and controlled, the way a person breathes when they are trying very hard not to let their face do something. That was all he needed. David looked back out through the windshield. He kept his face even. He thought about the past year, the separate sides of the bed, the excuses, the slow and careful distance Angela had been managing like a thermostat, keeping it just warm enough that he wouldn't notice the cold. She hadn't been pulling away. She had been buying time. She thought she could manage it, Patrice said quietly, like she was finishing a thought she hadn't meant to start. Keep things normal enough. Long enough to get everything where she needed it to be. And then just be done. David nodded once. "I shouldn't be here," Patrice said. "I know that. I'm glad you are," he said. And he meant it, in the way he meant everything, not as comfort, but as fact. "I need you not to say anything to Angela about this conversation. Can you do that?" Patrice nodded, fast. Yes, I won't." "Thank you," he said. She gathered her purse and reached for the door handle. His voice came out calm and even. "One more thing." She paused. "Does Troy know about the pregnancy?" A long second passed. Patrice nodded once. She didn't turn around. She pushed the door open and stepped out onto the gravel lot, and walked back to her white Civic without looking back. David watched her pull out of the lot. Then he pulled out himself, turned onto the main road, and drove 3 blocks. He stopped at the curb in front of a closed dry cleaner, engine running. He sat there. He thought about his brother's truck in his driveway, the easy angle it was always parked at, Troy's hand on his shoulder. There he is, the laugh that filled every room. He thought about a child. He thought about his father's company. He picked up his phone and called Jerome. Jerome answered on the second ring. "Pull the business financials," David said. 2 full years minimum. I want a forensic accountant, nobody connected to the company. A pause. "David, what did you find?" "I don't know yet," David said. "That's why I'm pulling them." Jerome was already there when David pulled into the parking lot. 7:42 in the morning. A Saturday. The lot was empty except for Jerome's silver Camry sitting close to the front entrance, the engine off. David parked beside him, and they walked inside together without saying much. The building was quiet, in a way it never was during the week. No phones, no compressors running in the yard, just the low hum of the HVAC and the sound of their shoes on the floor. David unlocked the conference room and turned on the overhead lights. Jerome set his briefcase on the table and opened it. He pulled out a printed report, thick, bound with a black clip. He set it on the table between them and sat down. David sat across from him. He looked at the cover page. The forensic accountant's name was printed at the top. A firm out of Charlotte. No prior relationship with Cole Family Electrical. No reason to soften anything. Jerome had done exactly what David asked. He always did. "Walk me through it," David said. Jerome opened the report to the second page and turned it so David could follow along. "It starts 3 years ago," he said. 6 months after your father's funeral." He let that land for just a second before continuing. "That's when Angela took over full bookkeeping responsibilities, sole control. Around the same time, Troy stopped raising the idea of bringing in an outside accountant." Jerome's voice was even, professional. He was not editorializing. He was just reading what the numbers said. Those 2 things together removed the last layer of external review. David looked at the page. Column after column of transaction records. Dates, amounts, vendor codes. "She built a vendor account," Jerome said. "Registered under the name Whitfield Business Solutions." He turned to a tabbed section near the back, a printout of the business registration. "The address on file is a mailbox store on Fairview Road. The company doesn't exist. No active business license, no employees, no physical location, just a name and a bank account." David looked at the registration. Angela's handwriting, thin and neat, on the original form. He recognized it the same way you recognize a familiar voice saying something wrong. The loops of her letters, the way she crossed the capital W. The transfers started small. Jerome continued. 1,400 here, 2,200 there. Spaced out enough that they wouldn't flag in a quarterly review, especially if the person doing the quarterly review was also the person making the transfers. He turned another page. Over the first year, the amounts grew. By year 2, she was moving money in blocks. By the 3rd year, he paused. He picked up the yellow legal pad beside him, wrote a number, and slid it across the table. David looked at it. He did not move. He did not blink. He let the number sit in front of him and looked at it the way he looked at structural damage reports on job sites, fully, without flinching, because flinching didn't fix anything. It was a large number. It had taken 3 years to build it. It represented work. His father's work. The early mornings and the late nights and the government contracts earned bid by bid. Relationship by relationship. Reputation by reputation. The number on that notepad was what Angela and Troy had decided that was worth to them. He set the notepad down. "Can all of it be proven?" he asked. "Yes." Jerome said it without hesitation. "The forensic trail is complete. Every transfer is documented. The vendor account is tied directly to Angela's registration, her signature, and a personal account in her name. Troy's involvement is circumstantial in the records, but his signatures appear on 2 internal budget approvals that cleared the way for larger transfer windows. That's enough. How long before we can move legally? 4 to 6 weeks to build a clean case. Enough to file civil and support a criminal referral simultaneously. Jerome folded his hands on the table. You want both? I want both, David said. Jerome nodded. He closed the report. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The HVAC ran. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street. David looked at the conference room wall, the framed photo of his father standing in front of the first company truck, arm crossed, squinting into the sun. 41 years old in that picture. Younger than David was now. He thought about the 6 months after the funeral. The grief that had made him grateful. Angela was handling the books. Grateful Troy was at the office. Grateful he could trust the people closest to him to hold things together while he figured out how to breathe again. He pushed his chair back and stood up. 4 weeks, he said. Keep building. He pulled into his mother's driveway at 2 in the afternoon. Troy's truck was already there. Of course it was. The smell of Carol's kitchen reached him before he made it to the porch. Sweet potatoes and something in the oven. The particular warmth of a Sunday that had been running since morning. Inside, his mother was moving between the kitchen and the dining room, arranging dishes. Troy was at the table with his phone, laughing at something. David hung up his jacket. He washed his hands at the kitchen sink and kissed his mother on the cheek. Dinner came together the way it always did. David sat at his usual seat. Angela was across from him, wearing a dark blue dress with a simple neckline. The color suited her. That's a good dress, David said. She looked up and smiled. Thank you, baby. Troy reached for the bread basket first. David took it from him when it came around, pulled a roll, and passed it to his mother. He ate everything on his plate. Jerome called on a Thursday afternoon. David was in the yard behind the office, checking a materials order against a delivery manifest, when his phone buzzed in his chest pocket. He handed the clipboard to his site manager, walked to the far end of the lot, and answered. Tell me, David said. I finished reviewing Troy's business correspondence. Jerome paused. Not for effect. Just long enough to make sure he had the words right. He's been calling clients, 2 of the biggest accounts, Meridian Property Group and the Forsyth County School District contract. Direct outreach, personal calls, a few emails. He's been telling them he's the operational backbone of Cole Family Electrical, that things are going to be changing soon. That when they do, he wants them to know they'll be taken care of. David was quiet. He pitched himself as the future, Jerome said. The implication was clear. There's a transition coming, and he's the side they want to be on when it happens. Outside, one of the delivery drivers backed a flatbed toward the loading dock. The reverse alarm beeped in a slow, steady rhythm. When did it start? David asked. The earliest email I found was 9 months ago. 9 months! Around the same time, Angela had stopped being distant and started being careful. Warm dinners, refilled glasses, questions about his day, asked with just enough interest to seem real. She had not been softening. She had been managing him, buying time while the exit was being constructed piece by piece. I called both clients directly, Jerome said. Today, I identified myself as the company's attorney and told them I was conducting a routine review of business relationships. Another pause. Neither of them is going anywhere, David. Meridian said they've had a contract with Cole Family Electrical for 11 years, and they intend to renew. The school district contact said Troy's calls felt, and this is her word, off. She filed them away and didn't follow up. David almost made a sound. He stopped it before it formed. Troy had been building his escape on borrowed ground. Client relationships he had not cultivated, accounts he had not serviced, goodwill he had not earned. He had sat in this yard, shaken hands with these people at job completions he showed up to at the end, and decided the relationships belonged to him. He had never stopped to verify whether they agreed. That was Troy exactly. The assumption had always come first. The work was someone else's. Lock it down, David said. Both clients get formal relationship letters from the company this week. My signature, not Troy's. Already drafted, Jerome said. Good. David turned and looked at the building. The Cole family electrical sign above the entrance, white letters on navy blue, the same sign his father had put up the year David started middle school. Jerome. Everything else is ready. The dissolution letter is witnessed and prepared. The civil filing is done. The criminal referral is written and ready to submit to the DA's office the moment you give the word. Jerome's voice stayed level, but there was something underneath it, the tone of a man who understood the weight of what he was holding. The divorce petition was filed this morning. Quietly. The forensic report is signed and attached. The footage drive is documented in the filing as primary evidence. Angela's account access revoked as of 8 a.m. Sunday. The system change is already queued. It won't trigger until the scheduled time. David nodded, even though Jerome couldn't see it. Sunday morning, conference room, I want you there. I'll be there. Tell my mother it's about the government contract. Good news. She'll come if it sounds like good news. Jerome was quiet for just a moment. Okay. David hung up. He put the phone back in his pocket. He picked up the clipboard from where his site manager had rested it against the fence and went back to the materials count. Angela made shrimp and rice that Friday evening. The good kind, the way she made it in the early years, with the bay leaves and the tomatoes from the can, the way his mother had shown her. The kitchen smelled warm when David came in from work. She had music playing low on the counter speaker. I thought you might be tired, she said, without looking up from the stove. I am, he said. Go wash up. It'll be ready in 20. He did. He came back downstairs in clean clothes and sat at the kitchen table while she plated the food. She set his plate in front of him and sat across from him. She asked about the week. He told her about the materials order, about a subcontractor running behind on a commercial job in Winston. She listened and made the right sounds. The food was good. It had always been good when she made the effort. Thank you, David said, when the plates were mostly clear. This was good, she smiled. I just wanted a nice dinner. He cleaned the plates. He wiped down the counter. He folded the dish towel over the oven handle the way he always did. Upstairs, he brushed his teeth, set his phone on the nightstand, and got into bed. He closed his eyes. He slept. David arrived at the Cole family electrical conference room at 7:45 in the morning. He did not turn on all the lights, just the overhead panel above the table. He set Jerome's folder at the chair to his right. He opened his laptop at the head of the room, angled the screen slightly toward the center of the table, and pulled up the footage file. He did not play it. He just made sure it was there, queued, ready. Then he sat down and waited. His mother arrived first. Carol Cole came through the door at 8:15 in her Sunday best. A deep burgundy dress, her good pearl earrings, the ones his father had given her for their 30th anniversary. She was carrying a covered glass dish with banana pudding, still cold from her refrigerator, a sheet of foil pressed carefully over the top. Baby, she said, and kissed him on the cheek. She smelled like the same lotion she had worn his entire life. I told Deacon Harris I'd be at second service. You're going to make me a liar. I'll be quick, David said. He stood and took the dish from her and set it on the credenza along the far wall. She sat down 2 chairs from the head of the table, adjusted her purse in her lap, and looked around the room with the quiet pride she always showed in this building. His father had built the conference room as an addition in 2009, a declaration more than a necessity. We are a company that holds meetings. Carol had picked the paint color. Patrice arrived 8 minutes later. David had called her Thursday night, after Jerome's call, after the shrimp and rice, after Angela had gone to bed. He had kept it brief. I need you at the office, Sunday at 8:30. Don't tell your sister. Patrice had been quiet for a long moment. Then she said yes. She came in wearing a gray cardigan and dark jeans, her natural hair pulled back. No jewelry. She nodded at David. She nodded at Carol. She took the chair in the far corner of the room, near the window, away from the table's center, and folded her hands in her lap, and looked at nothing in particular. Carol glanced at her with mild curiosity, but said nothing. Jerome arrived at 8:35. Troy and Angela arrived together at 8:42. Troy came in talking. He was dressed sharp, pressed collar, clean jacket, and he was already in the middle of a story about a parking situation outside, laughing at his own punchline before he finished it. He clapped David on the shoulder when he passed him, the way he always did, heavy and familiar, and pulled out a chair near the middle of the table. Angela came in behind him. She was composed, dressed well, carrying her phone face down. She looked around the room, noted Patrice in the corner. Something moved across her face, brief and controlled, and then she sat down. Not beside David. One chair to Troy's left, with an empty seat between herself and her brother-in-law. It looked natural. It looked incidental. David had been watching Angela manage appearances for the better part of a year, and he recognized the calculation behind every casual gesture. "Mom, you brought pudding?" Troy said, spotting the dish on the credenza. "I brought it for the meeting," Carol said pleasantly. "That's what I'm talking about." Troy grinned. He was completely at ease. David let the room settle for a moment. Then he said, "This is Jerome Banks. Most of you know him as a family friend. Today he's here in his professional capacity as the company's attorney." Jerome nodded once from his seat. He did not smile. He placed his folder flat on the table in front of him and folded his hands on top of it. Troy glanced at Jerome, then at David. The grin softened slightly. "Attorney? What happened? Government contract have some fine print?" "Let me start," David said. The room went quiet. David looked at the table for a moment. Then he began to speak about his father. He talked about what Walter Cole had built. Not the revenue numbers, not the employee count, not the contracts, but what it had meant. A black man who started with one truck, one license, and an unwillingness to be told no, who kept his books by hand and paid every vendor on time, and never once shook a hand he didn't intend to honor, who used to say that a man's name was either an asset or a liability, and that the choice was entirely his. David talked about what this building represented, what the sign above the door represented, what it had cost to put it there, and what it would cost to lose it. Nobody moved. Carol had her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were soft. David stopped talking. He turned the laptop to face the room and pressed play. The footage was 63 seconds long. No sound, just the home office, his desk, his father's old filing cabinet visible in the corner, the company's accounting software open on the screen. Angela sat at the keyboard. Troy stood behind her, one hand resting on the back of the chair. They were both watching the screen. Angela clicked through something, typed a number, and Troy said something that made her laugh. She leaned back. He leaned forward. They looked like two people who had done this many times before and would do it many more. The clip ended. The room was completely still. Carol set her fork down on the edge of the banana pudding dish. Slowly, without looking away from the screen, David looked at the notepad in front of him. He read the number out loud. Not as one figure, digit by digit. The way you read a serial number, the way you make sure every part of it lands. Nobody spoke. David reached across the table and placed the dissolution letter in front of Troy. Troy looked down at it. He looked up at David. He opened his mouth. David raised one hand. Just one hand. Flat. Steady. Troy stopped. The room held completely still. Carol was staring at Troy, not with tears, not with fury, with something quieter and more final than either of those things. Angela had not looked up from the table. Her hands were in her lap, and her jaw was set, and she had not moved since the footage ended. Jerome opened his folder. Angela moved first. She set her phone on the table. Face down, slow, deliberate. like she was buying herself 2 seconds to decide who she was going to be in this room. Then she sat up straight and looked at David with the expression she used when she was about to explain something to someone who didn't quite understand. "I need to say something." Her voice was steady, practiced. "This marriage has been over for a long time, David. You know that? I've been unhappy for years, and I tried to tell you that in 100 different ways. And you were just never there. Not really. You were here." She gestured vaguely at the walls. "At this company. In your head. You gave everything to this place, and I got whatever was left over, which was not much." She paused. She let that sit. "I'm not saying what happened was handled right, but I need you to understand that I didn't just wake up one day and decide to blow up my life. I was already living in a marriage that had been empty for years." She said it clearly, calmly. The way a person speaks when they have rehearsed a thing so many times, it no longer sounds rehearsed. Patrice, in the corner, looked down at her hands. Troy said nothing. He was watching the dissolution letter like it might say something different if he stared at it long enough. David waited until Angela was fully finished. He did not shift in his seat. He did not look away from her. He let the silence run for a few seconds after her last word, long enough for everyone in the room to feel it. Then he asked her one question. "Did you use my father's company to fund a life with my brother?" Angela's jaw tightened. The composure held, but something behind it moved. She looked at the table. She did not answer. David nodded once. "Then we're done talking." He turned to Troy. Troy looked up. For the first time since the footage had played, he met David's eyes directly. His expression was working through several things at once: the rehearsed indignation, the defensive crouch, the reflex toward charm. None of them settled. David looked at his brother and spoke quietly. "I'm not angry at you." He said it simply, the way you state a fact about the weather. "I need you to hear that clearly. I'm not raising my voice. My hands are still. There's nothing in me right now that wants to flip this table or put my hands on you." He paused. "You should be more scared of that, not less. Because what it means is that this isn't about how I feel. It's not emotional. It's not something I'm going to sleep off and reconsider. It's permanent." Troy's mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. "The day you walked into my house behind my wife," David said, "and the day you sat in this building and helped her route my father's money into an account with her family's name on it, that day, you stopped being my brother. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's already done. It happened the moment you made the choice. I'm just the last one in the room to say it out loud." He said it once. He did not repeat it. The room was absolutely silent. Then Carol stood up. She did it slowly, with the careful dignity of a woman who had decided something and was not going to be rushed through it. She picked up her purse from the chair beside her. She straightened her dress, and she looked at Troy, not at Angela, not at the folder in Jerome's hands, not at the laptop, just at Troy. She said his name, just his name. One word. The way a mother says a name when she has loved someone his entire life and is now setting that love down somewhere she cannot follow him. Then she walked out of the conference room. She did not look at Angela. She did not say goodbye to anyone. Her heels were quiet on the floor, and then she was through the door, and the door swung shut behind her, and the banana pudding sat untouched on the credenza. Nobody filled the silence she left. Jerome waited 10 full seconds. Then he opened his folder. "The civil suit was filed Friday afternoon," he said. His voice was level and unhurried. "The forensic accountant's report is attached as supporting documentation. We are also referring the matter to the district attorney's office. The fabricated vendor account, the transaction history, and the registration records for Whitfield Business Solutions are all included in that referral." He turned a page. "The divorce petition was filed this morning at 8 a.m. As of that same time, All bookkeeping access tied to Angela's credentials has been revoked. He looked at Troy. Your equity stake in Cole Family Electrical is the subject of the civil action. Pending resolution, it is frozen. The two client accounts you contacted, Hargrove Municipal and Denton County, have both confirmed in writing that they are remaining with the company. He turned another page. There is no exit package. There is no negotiated departure. There is a lawsuit and a criminal referral and a divorce proceeding. Jerome closed the folder. That's the picture. Troy and Angela left the building separately. Troy went first, without his jacket, without saying anything, the dissolution letter still on the table where David had placed it. Angela followed 3 minutes later. She picked up her phone, smoothed her skirt, and walked out through the side door without speaking to Patrice, without looking back. They did not leave together. They did not speak to each other on the way out. David remained in his chair at the head of the table. Jerome closed his folder and set it flat. David looked at him. Everything filed? Everything, Jerome said. It's done. David nodded. He turned and looked out the window. 14 months. That was how long it took for the dust to fully settle, for the lawyers to finish talking, for the paperwork to stop arriving in waves and start arriving in ones and twos, for the building to feel like his again. Not haunted, not held hostage, just his. David stood at the head of the conference room table on a Tuesday morning in late October, a pen in his hand. The government contract spread open in front of him. 41 pages. His father had spent the better part of a decade positioning Cole Family Electrical to be eligible for this kind of work. Licensing requirements, bonding thresholds, workforce certifications. The old man had checked every box methodically. 1 year at a time, the way he did everything. He never saw the contract come through. He never got to sign his name to it. David pressed the pen to the signature line and signed for both of them. Jerome was there. So was Marcus Webb, the company's new CFO, a quiet, thorough man in his early 40s who came from a municipal audit background and had, in his first 3 months, restructured the company's accounts into something that could survive any scrutiny. Beside Marcus sat Donna Price, the compliance officer David hired 6 months ago. She had already caught 2 billing irregularities from subcontractors and fixed them before they became problems. She was exactly what the company needed. She was exactly what it had been missing. David signed the last page and set down the pen. "That's it," Marcus said. "That's it," David agreed. The room was quiet in a good way, the kind of quiet that comes after something is finished, rather than before something is about to go wrong. David had learned to tell the difference. He looked up at the wall behind the table. 4 of his father's original ledgers hung there in matching frames. The ones with the hand-drawn margin notes, the careful columns of numbers in blue ink, the occasional small sketch of a wiring diagram where his father had been working something out in his head. Jerome had suggested the frames. David hadn't been able to think of anything better to put on that wall, and now he couldn't imagine anything else there. 41 employees. Full benefits, as of 8 months ago. 3 new apprentices starting in January. His father's company. Still standing. Patrice had come by 3 weeks earlier, on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced. David was at his desk when his assistant told him she was in the lobby. He told her to send her up. She looked older than he remembered. Not old. Just like someone who had been carrying weight and was only recently beginning to put it down. She sat in the chair across from his desk and folded her hands and didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm not here for anything," she said finally. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm doing well," David said. He meant it. She nodded. She looked around the office, at the framed ledgers visible through the glass conference room wall, at the whiteboard covered in project timelines, at the quiet steadiness of the place. "It looks good," she said. "All of it." "It is," he said. They sat for a moment in the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable. she had done something hard. It had cost her something real. Her sister's contact, her family's peace, a relationship she couldn't get back the way it was. David didn't minimize that. You did the right thing. I know it wasn't easy. I know it cost you. Patrice looked at him steadily. It needed to be done. Yeah, he said. It did. She stood to leave, and David walked her to the door. No big promises. No declaration that everything was forgiven and forgotten, and they'd all move forward together. Just two people who had been through something hard, standing in a hallway, telling each other the truth. Some bridges could be stood on without being fully rebuilt. That was enough. After the contract signing, David drove to the cemetery alone. He parked at the far end of the lot, the way he always did, and walked the familiar path between the rows of headstones until he reached his father's plot. The grass was trimmed. Someone from the grounds crew had placed a small stone on the corner of the marker, a sign that someone else had been here recently. His mother, probably. He stood there for a moment with his hands in his jacket pockets. Then he reached into the inside pocket and pulled out a single flower, a yellow chrysanthemum, cut that morning from the garden his father had planted along the back fence of the family house. His mother kept it going. Every fall, the chrysanthemums came back. He held the flower and looked at his father's name cut into the stone. Then he spoke. "The contract came through," he said. His voice was steady and low. "The one from the county, the municipal work. 41 people on payroll now. We've got a CFO. We've got compliance. It's solid, Pop. It's clean." He paused. "Troy's gone. Angela's gone. Everything they took, we got most of it back. The rest of it I made up in the first year." He was quiet for a second. "I kept it. I kept all of it." He set the chrysanthemum at the base of the headstone, pressed flat against the stone. Then he walked back to his truck and drove to the office. There was work to do. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.